Now, the late elder statesman Ahmed Joda, OFR, CON, CFR, has been described by many as a stable, trustworthy administrator, a visionary civil servant who genuinely tried to make Nigeria's processes run smoothly for successive administrations, both military and civilian, a man you could count on to deliver. Well, he died earlier this month at the age of 91, but not before he'd attained the greatest heights as a journalist, super permanent secretary, and elder statesman. Ahmed Joda came to prominence in the golden era of public service in Nigeria in the 60s and 70s after serving as a permanent secretary in the federal ministries of information, education and industries. He moved on to serve as chairman and board member of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, the Nigerian Communications Commission, Flour Mills of Nigeria, and the Nigerian LNG. He was also a member of the 1988 Constituent Assembly, and in 1999 he became a member of the committee that advised President Obasanjo on poverty alleviation. Later, in 2015, he would lead the transition committee that ushered in the Buhari administration in 2015. Mohammed Hayatu-Deen now sitting in the studio, so let me go to him. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just briefly tell us about Ahmed Joda, a man who is remembered as having worked tirelessly to build Nigeria's public civil service system. What was your relationship with him? Was he a sort of mentor to you?
So first and foremost, I thank you for bringing me onto this program. Alhaji Ahmed Joda is an extraordinary human being, and we mourn his loss because he was one of the most articulate spokesmen of modern times and one of the greatest statesmen that this nation has actually produced. I've had a very long and productive relationship with him as a father figure, a guardian, a mentor, a teacher, a friend, and a counselor over a period of 40 years. So that is the background. What makes him very unique, and we can drill into this some more later on, is the fact that he was a man of extraordinary intellect and vision. God had endowed him with a very large and fluid and malleable brain. Second, he had a character as strong as a rock. He had a rock-solid character like granite. Thirdly, he had left a legacy of extraordinary public service going back over the last 50 to 60 years. He kept very good company across the entire social structure, both in this country and all over the world. To many who did not know him very well, he was also very progressive and possessed radical views. Alhaji Ahmed Joda had a worldview, and he lived in the 21st century, both in terms of embracing modern ideas and modern tools. He was a peacemaker par excellence and a reconciler in chief. He was a man of great humor, a man of family, and a man of God. So in summary, that's how I see Alhaji Ahmed Joda and his life.
Indeed, for that summary. So a man who exemplified the best, really, not just in character, but in the Nigerian public system. Are there lessons for Nigerian public servants from him?
I believe there are fundamental lessons, but I think we need to trace that journey, and from there we can derive the lessons. So he began his career in broadcasting. That was in northern Nigeria back in the day. grew through the ranks to become Chief Information Officer, and then went on to become the Northern Region Permanent Secretary of Information. And while he was in broadcasting, his path crossed with that of Alhaji Mohammed Hayatu-Deen. In the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, he was the news editor, and Alhaji Mohammed Hayatu-Deen was the news reader at the time. And while he was in the Northern Nigerian government, Mohammed Hayatu-Deen was actually secretary to the cabinet, or assistant secretary to the cabinet, while he was permanent secretary. Beyond that, he held 3 ministries at the federal level: Federal Ministry of Information, Ministry of Education, and also Ministry of Industries as permanent secretary. So he belonged to that extraordinary league of gentlemen who are called super permanent secretaries. Remember that in 1967 to 71, when he was permanent secretary of information, that was a very critical period in Nigeria's history. And during that period, he invigilated the dissemination of information and the management of information during the entire period of the Civil War. And he was such a bridge builder that he was able to generate consensus during that period so that the federal government will get in the right kind of information on the conduct of the Civil War. And even then, what he wanted was to actually build bridges with the people in Biafra so that Nigeria could become a better, more united and stronger country. And subsequent to the end of the Civil War, the program of rehabilitation, reconstruction, and the other one, I've just lost memory of it, the 3 R's under the Gowon administration. He was one of the major articulators of that vision that helped accelerate the pace of bringing the nation together. Finally, I think he was also a very, very important contributor to the development of the second National Development Plan, along with great people like Atta, Asiodu, Alison Aida, Ebong, and the rest of them, those who, Damchida, and all the other super permanent secretaries. So that was his record of service in the public service. He retired, believe it or not, at the tender age of 48, and yet left such a major landmark on Nigeria's landscape at that time. We could discuss his period of service to Nigeria and humanity and the world after he retired.
Right, okay. We'll come back in a minute and talk some more about him, but do stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our remembrance of the life less ordinary of the elder statesman Ahmed Joda, who died earlier this month. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now today we're paying tribute to a true officer of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Ahmed Joda, who died on August the 13th after a brief illness in Yola. He's been eulogized across Nigeria, and many remember him as part of the pioneering group of indigenous civil servants that laid the foundation for the Nigerian civil service system. Bureaucrats who took off from where colonial Britain left off, using the professional grounding they got from the British public civil service, public servants who felt that they owed a patriotic loyalty to the state. In other words, ask not what the state can do for you, rather ask what you can do for the state. That could be said to be the motto of the hugely public-spirited Ahmed Joda. And it was that same spirit that he brought to bear when he and others were called upon to rehabilitate the Nigerian state administratively after a devastating civil war. That's why they're called super permanent secretaries. And the eminent Nigerian economist, Mohammed Hayatu-Deen, CEO of Alpine Investment and former chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, is still with me from our studios in Lagos. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us, Mr. Hayatu-Deen. And of course, Ahmed Joda talked a lot, didn't he, about civil service reform in Nigeria, something he considered to be unfinished business, because he seemed to think that people in public service never quite understood what the public and the service in public service actually entailed, and why it was such a critical assignment that, as one journalist quoted him as saying, involves the administrative destiny of Nigeria.
Yes, as a matter of fact, he had told me on several occasions over the last 25 to 30 years that if this nation is to make progress, make rapid progress and join the League of Progressive Nations in a very fast changing world, he considered the public service and the civil service as the bedrock, as the engine room within which you can actually frame public policy and also implement it seamlessly, so that Nigerians can have a much higher quality of life in terms of service delivery that we made available to the largest number of people for the greatest good. He has worked tirelessly up to probably 2 months ago. I can bear witness that up to 2 months ago, he was busy on his computer producing all manner of policy positions for purposes of advocacy and for purposes of submitting to government that Nigeria finds its rightful place in the Committee of Nations. I think one of the greatest things that he would have carried away with him in terms of frustration is issues relating to the quality of public service that has deteriorated considerably over the last few decades. And if he had his way, he would make that a position, he would make that an issue of preeminence to ensure that the public service is geared for excellent performance going forward. Of course, with that, he also recognized the many other things that have to go along with that. One is the quality of leadership, because the political masters are those who are responsible for actually defining the destiny of the country and providing a very clear and cluttered vision as to where this country should go forward. Second, to produce a blueprint, and then based on that blueprint, the public servants can then be given the tools and the training and the values and the ethos required to implement these policy proposals seamlessly. So that was clearly something that was uppermost in his heart, no doubt about it.
So can it then be said that he was a disappointed man, let down by the direction Nigeria took away from the far-reaching reforms that he proposed? Because, I mean, all the way to the end, he seemed to be struggling to add value to things like the so-called next level change agenda of the Buhari administration.
Well, the thing is that Ahmed Joda is a perpetual optimist. He's never the kind of person who is going to be sulking and complaining. He never ever once complained. He sees the world as a very complex place that has many, many faces of complexity. And he sees it as a place where people, so long as they're breathing and have energy in them, should continue to be churning out ideas, should continue to be acting on their promises in order to make things happen. So Ahmed Joda was never disappointed or aggrieved at the time that he died. He just felt that it was important for people, when they fall down, to actually stand up, pick things up and run with it. So he's always been living in the future, so to speak, and refused to be burdened by the baggage of the past.
Okay. Well, I mean, just to get a better sense of who he is, because obviously you know him a lot better than we do. I mean, he had quite a historical family pedigree, didn't he? I read somewhere that his great-great-grandfather was Modibo Raji, a 19th century Islamic scholar and contemporary of Usman Dan Fodio. I mean, what it must be to know that kind of history about yourself.
Absolutely correct. But I must confess to you that this is the first time I'm hearing this. My obviously my intellectual curiosity, and because he's a very simple person, very humble person, he would never have wanted to convey that kind of information to me in many of our private conversations. He never likes to talk about himself.
I'm glad I was able to bring that to your attention, given the knowledge of him that you have. But let me ask it in a different way then, because looking at his formative years for answers of who he grew up to become, he once described attending Quranic school and how the rigor and discipline associated with it prepared him for excellence when he transited from that to Western formal education. So the background of straddling the two great educational traditions of Nigeria, in a sense, helped him to become a true Nigerian, didn't it?
Absolutely. So development actually begins at a very early stage at home. So he had a perfect upbringing, and then on top of that he had the Islamic education, very well integrated education, and then before he then started embracing and imbibing the virtues of Western education. So he had firm grounding in family values, in his own religion, before he then went on to do other things to acquire, that massive intellectual capacity that he had.
Right, okay, we've got about a minute or so left, Mr. Hayatu-Deen. So clearly the end of an era. I mean, where does Nigeria find people like that?
I think there are a couple of actions that need to be taken. Nigeria's leaders, whoever they are and wherever they may be, in whatever roles they find themselves, should actually relive that kind of life in their conduct, both in their private and their public conduct. So that way, current generation of Nigerians and future generations can then imbibe these kind of values. Secondly, I think in our curriculum in schools at all levels, it is important to have a specific subject that talks either through our history or through contemporary studies about our heroes.
Okay, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Mohammed Hayatu-Deen, but we're out of time. But thank you very much indeed for coming in to talk to us about Ahmed Joda, and that's the eminent Nigerian economist, Mohammed Hayatu-Deen.